Hello, I'm Professor Barry Smith, and today I join you for a home wine tasting session in association with the University of London Venues. So I want to think how we can get the best out of our lockdown wines. We obviously have to drink in moderation, so we want a better experience. So how can we get that? Well, start with good glassware to begin with. That's quite important. You do want a glass where the bowl is wider than the brim, and that's so that you can funnel all those beautiful aromas to the nose as you smell and as you sip. And we know that smell is a huge part to do with the flavors that we experience in wines, and we'll get to that a little bit later. I wanted to think of wines that were particularly versatile with food. And for that reason, I'm going to start with a wine which you will often be offered when you ask for a dry white wine, namely a Sauvignon Blanc. Now, the Sauvignon Blanc I'm going to try is a classic, characteristic New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And it comes from that region in New Zealand, Marlborough, where some of the best Sauvignon Blancs that are made there in that part of the world, that's where they come from. So Sauvignon Blanc is a wine which has three distinctive parts of the world that produce it. There's the Loire Valley in France, there is Marlborough and other places in New Zealand, and then there is Chile. And these wines, although made from the same grape, are made in very different conditions and in different soils, and as a result of sun, soil, grape, and human endeavour, they will turn out slightly differently. So the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc actually manages to get more ripeness from the grape because of the warmer climate, more sunshine, and therefore, as well as having those flinty and rather tart gooseberry notes, you also have something like passion fruit, maybe a little bit of tropical fruit note in there too, maybe some white peach. But the most important thing about a Sauvignon Blanc, and the thing that the winemakers strive for, is retaining the aromas, the primary aromas as they call them, the ones that come from the grape itself and not just from the process of making wines from those grapes. So first thing to do is to stick your nose in it when it's still and see what you get. Now, because it's a Sauvignon from New Zealand, I do get that gooseberry note, and I also get a little bit of grassiness, almost asparagus really. And then underneath all of that, but definitely there, is the classic, characteristic, telltale aroma of a Sauvignon Blanc, and that is cat's pee. Yep, cat's pee. So you get that slightly nose-nipping cat's pee there. And that's interesting because if you're a wine merchant, you're not going to talk about the lovely aroma of cat's pee. So they have their own name. They call it boxwood. Delicious, boxwood. But one Australian winemaker, as a little bit of a jibe at the New Zealand comrades who were making very good Sauvignon Blanc, he made his Sauvignon Blanc and just called it cat's pee on a gooseberry bush, which is actually pretty good description of what you get on the nose. Now, the reason why people will be offered a Sauvignon Blanc because it's fresh, it's crisp usually, and the freshness comes from the high acidity in this grape. So the acidity will give it that lemony sharpness. And interesting, we say that the wine tastes sharp. And sharp's a feel, although it's a perfectly good description of what it is when we get that slightly tangy, racy, sour, acidic note. But as long as the other flavors are in there too, it will work very well. And of course, the cleanness of this and the high acidity of it make it a very good food wine. This is something that you can throw at most dishes, very difficult dishes. Asparagus and lots of complicated flavors. You can throw it at highly spiced Asian and Southeast Asian food, and you will get something which stands up and still is recognizable for what it is. And it's a complement to the food that you're eating. So that's why I picked it, because I think you probably want to make sure that when you open a bottle and you drink carefully, there's something that's there when you're having food, and this will work very well. Now, I'm swirling it round and round. Why do people do that? You might wonder. Is it just a kind of pretentious thing? Well, a lot of people have started copying it, but they may not know why they're doing it. When you smell the wine still, you get the most volatile elements coming off. These are the aromas that are so volatile that they can punch through the alcohol and reach your nose. But the slightly less volatile and less showy aromas are going to struggle to break free. So we have to agitate the surface of the wine to let these other aromas come out. And what I'd like you to do, just for your own amusement and also to realize why we do this swirling at all, is to smell the wine still and then to try it once you've agitated it. Now, took me a long time to do this without throwing it all over my shirt. So you can put it down on the table and you can swirl it very hard and then put your nose in it. And it's different. There are other notes that you're getting there. The richer, fruitier notes, not just that immediate zing of the gooseberry and of the cat's pee. Okay, next stage. Let's try it on the palate. So as you swallow, you'll get that little razor-like acidity, that racy acidity going through the sides of your tongues and your cheeks, and puckers the mouth a little bit. And it definitely reminds you of lemon, but with all white wines which have decent amounts of acidity, it's a good idea to decide, is that acidity more like the taste of lemon or more like the taste of lime? And you will be able to tell the difference. You'll notice that. But it's a good question to ask yourself that. A lot of Rieslings will have a lime note to them, and a lot of wines made in Australia in the hot sun, if they can't retain enough acidity because the grape is getting too ripe and it's losing its acidity, they might put tartaric acid in there, and you can get this streak of lime running through the wines, and that tells you that it's been added afterwards. Okay, Sauvignon Blanc. Now, I would also suggest that you try drinking a little glass of Sauvignon Blanc whenever you want to try some cheese. It's a classic thing of the British to say, oh yes, we have claret with cheese. Oxford and Cambridge colleges have been doing this for a long time. They're wrong. It's a bad idea. Not a good thing to do. And the French, of course, have now come around entirely to drinking white wine with cheese. Why? Well, because cheeses are high in acidity anyway. I mean, you've got a lot of acid to make the cheese, and the acidity there is perfectly balanced and matched by acidity in a white wine, and red wines always have much less acidity. So this is a good way to get the right combination of cheese and wine. What better? Beautiful match. So I'm going to try another food-friendly wine for you. And this wine, a little harder to source, not so readily available, but worth seeking out. This wine is from the Jurançon. So it's from the southwest of France. And this wine is a Jurançon Sec. That means a dry wine made from Jurançon. They will tell you it's a dry wine because in Jurançon they make sweet dessert wines. And we're going to see that there's something of that character, even though this is a dry wine. Now, I'm offering you a little bit of a exploration of white wines that are not Chardonnay. And that's really just for the novelty and interest while we're in lockdown and we want to experience more things. I think it's as well to try to extend our range of the things that we might like to taste. And I'm not against Chardonnay. I know there are some people who say anything but Chardonnay. But remember, some of the world's greatest white wines, the wines made in Burgundy, are made from Chardonnay. So I would certainly not be against it in general. But here's just a little bit of novelty and interest. So this wine is made from two grapes. And the two grapes are Petit Massang and Gros Massang, so small and big Massang. And this is a very, very different wine from our Sauvignon Blanc. If you look at the colour of it, golden, almost oxidized. That means it's almost had some oxygen getting at it to turn it to a slightly sherry-like character. And so whereas the Sauvignon was light and fresh, this is more viscous, slightly more oily, but in a good way, in a delicious way. So, same thing again. What we're going to do is just smell it while it's still. And that first nose, when you've got it completely still, should tell you if there are any faults. Is there anything that strikes you as a little bit off, a little bit repelling, anything that's a bit like damp cellar or musty that might be coming from the cork? Any fault in the wine? No. Instead, the funny thing that I always get from a Jurançon Sec is it's like the core of a ripe or overripe pineapple, but without the sweetness. That's the kind of note that you get on the nose. So now we'll try agitating it to break the surface tension and see what else appears. So surrounding that core, there's something a little bit like other types of stone fruit, other sorts of almost floral, maybe a little bit like elderflower. Okay, so this is a wine which, unlike the very clean Sauvignon Blanc that comes into the mouth and then disappears quickly and leaves you with that lovely freshness, instead what we have here is something that is a little more luscious, a little more viscous, a little more concentrated, and that means that we've had grapes that have less acidity, much less acidity. But because they have less acidity doesn't mean that they're not going to be good with food. This is going to be food in a different way because it's got its own character and because it is quite a viscous wine. It really does stand up to a lot of foods. So there are foods which are tricky to match with wines in a surprising way. If you think of pea soup, and if you think of pea soup with mint in it, think of pea soup with mint in it. That's a very tricky thing to match with a wine. But this is a wine which will stand up to almost anything you throw at it. You can have asparagus, you can have cooked tomatoes and eggs, you can have all sorts of things there which may make difficulties. And this will by and large hold its own. Might even stand up to some mackerel, but that's a tricky one for wine pairing. Okay, so let's try that now. So from the nose, there's nothing that you expect to be sweet about it. It's got a slightly, almost like a sherry-like or waxy, straw-like character to it. A little bit stony on the nose. So let's see what it's like on the palate. So it's very mouth-filling. It's very warming because the alcohol level is much higher here. You can feel the warmth and you can feel the unctuousness of the wine. But when it leaves, it seems to leave in waves. You have the first swallow and the second and the third, and away it goes. Whereas the Sauvignon Blanc is route one, goes in there, clean, gone. This is a little more for taking your time and concentrating on. A little more going on with it, I think. And again, this wine is fabulously good with food. And because of those slightly overripe, fruit flavors, those dense sort of waxy notes, and something a little bit bitter in the finish. It will, again, still go very well with a piece of cheese. This is a piece of Gruyere. Perfect. With that slightly bitter note you get in the Jurançon Sec. As rich as a dessert wine in its weight, but as you swallow, vinified dry, and you get that apple core, ripe pineapple coming through. So here are two very different wines, but I think they would give you a lot of pleasure and interest in different ways. And remember, if you're wanting to extend your wine journey and you want to try something other than the wines you've been drinking fairly regularly until now, go to your local wine merchant. They would be very happy to make recommendations. You tell them something of the wines that you like and tell them you want to try something else. And do take their recommendations because they know a lot. And they would be keen and excited and enthusiastic to try to give you some other suggestions. And also, right now, they need our help. So remember to support your local wine merchant. I hope this has been useful to you. I hope you will now go and have a look at other University of London venues videos online, including some of the recipe suggestions from our executive chef Dan at Senate House, and maybe some of the wines I've offered you today will complement Dan's dishes. I certainly hope so. And remember, drink sensibly, but get more out of each glass of wine. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll be back for more.